How's it going, guys? I just realized that I didn't grab the book or my headphones. I'm scrambling in a huge hurry today to get lots of things done. So we've made it to part 4 of the Kybalion. Luckily the books didn't reach. I hope the audio's alright. Just gotta figure out where we left off. The divine paradox. This is one of the hardest things, I think, for people to really wrap their heads around. It's very difficult for people to accept. To me, it's pretty self-evident that it's a necessity of the universe. It's all of the phenomena in the universe is the product of the interplay of these antinomies, these opposing forces. And it's not necessarily, we think about opposites interacting and we think about, like cancellation, like negative plus positive 1 equals 0, right? But that's not necessarily the case. They're not necessarily in opposition, they're just opposites. So like you have the fundamental masculine energy or consciousness and the feminine and all of the things that fall into their jurisdiction, right? So those interactions produce, from the alchemical thing, from two things comes a third thing of a higher nature. But it also leaves us with duality and a lot of uncomfortable truths. What's up, Nick? The necessity of the coexistence of dark and light, of good and evil, for example. So let's see what the Kybalion has to say about the great divine paradox. The half-wise, recognizing the comparative unreality of the universe, imagine that they may defy its laws. Such are vain and presumptuous fools, and they are broken against the rocks and torn asunder by the elements by reason of their folly. The truly wise, knowing the nature of the universe, use law against laws, the higher against the lower, and by the art of alchemy, transmute that which is undesirable into that which is worthy, and thus triumph. Mastery consists not in abnormal dreams, visions, and fantastic imaginings, but in using the higher forces against the lower, escaping the pains of the lower planes by vibrating on the higher. Transmutation, not presumptuous denial, is the weapon of the master. And so a good example of this, using the laws of nature to constrain forces of a lower order. If you think of the law of entrainment, which states that any pulses or cycling pulses, electromagnetic waves do it, clocks will do it, human hearts do it. They'll sync up, and the faster or higher cycle constrains the lower. The lower raises to the higher. Okay, so for example, when a magician speaks of constraining a demon, you can have confidence that these lower orders of consciousness will be compelled to obey you, because we know that the laws of nature, the laws of creation, restrict their conduct, so that they have no choice. And that's what is meant by this. And this is the real value of having like a scientific approach to spirituality, because you don't have to just blindly believe anything. If you have a solid background in the sciences, stay abreast of physics, know the basic laws of electrodynamics and thermodynamics. These are the mechanisms that are in play when people are successful at doing what we think of as magic. Oh, also I should mention that, speaking of constraining demons, the purpose of that, for example, is that, greed, you can't necessarily just eradicate aspects of your being, but you can choose how to relate to them. And so that's the idea, that you could take a vice like greed and turn it into a positive type of ambition by, tempering it with love, for example, which is a opposing force, right? So these two antinomies, put them together, and the third thing arises of a higher nature. So, this is the paradox of the universe, resulting from the principle of polarity, which manifests when the all begins to create. Hearken to it for it points the difference between half wisdom and wisdom. While to the infinite all, the universe, its laws, its powers, its life, its phenomena, are as things witnessed in a state of meditation or dream. Yet to all that is finite, the universe must be treated as real, and life and action and thought must be based thereupon accordingly, although with an ever understanding of the higher truth, each according to its own plane and laws. Were they all to imagine that the universe were indeed reality, then woe to the universe, for there would be then no escape from lower to higher. Divine word, it's an interesting directional designation. Then would the universe become a fixity and progress would become impossible. It's being a little bit vague there, but the idea is that, like when we talk about in physics, how a probability cloud exists as a bunch of potential positions until it's measured, and then it collapses into somethingness. He's kind of saying that this sort of potentiality is how the divine mind is dreaming the universe, so that it's always in a state of flux instead of a fixed state. And so it's also worth mentioning here that this reflects the Hindu idea of the opening of the Eye of Shiva. So when God is sleeping, the universe exists, and when God wakes, when the eye opens, the universe is destroyed. And so this is a similar kind of idea. If man, owing to half wisdom, acts and lives and thinks of the universe as merely a dream, akin to his own finite dreams, then indeed does it so become for him, and like a sleepwalker he stumbles ever around in a circle, making no progress, and being forced into an awakening at last by his falling bruised and bleeding over the natural laws which he ignored. That reminds me of something that Winston Churchill said, that men often stumble upon the truth, but they usually just pick themselves up, dust off, and keep going. Keep your mind ever on the star, but let your eyes watch over your footsteps, lest you fall into the mire by reason of your upward gaze. Remember the divine paradox, that while the universe is not, still it is. Remember ever the two poles of truth, the absolute and the relative. Beware of half-truths. This stuff, now we're in the territory of mysticism that people often use to kind of discredit all of it, because there are all these paradoxes that can't be resolved. And so a lot of people see that as like inconsistency that means that it's not real and it's not true. And the reality is that these paradoxes have to exist in order to sustain creation. And you can have two opposite statements that are equally true. And it's just something that you have to recognize and learn to kind of integrate and understand. All of these things are both true and false, and it is both true and false to say that they are true and false is a great way to express that. What Hermetists know as the law of paradox is an aspect of the principle of polarity. The Hermetic writings are filled with references to the appearance of the paradox in the consideration of the problems of life and being. The teachers are constantly warning their students against the error of omitting the other side of any question. That's a really important point as well. When you're going through a process of self-analysis, or you're trying to become mindful of your own proclivities psychologically, and your habits, and how you relate to your instincts, a really good practice, because you're too far out in the forest to see the trees, right? A really good practice to ensure that you escape from your own mind-forged manacles is to, it can be a meditation, you can do this while you're walking around, but to meet every belief and idea that you have with its opposite and try to believe it and actually see it from that point of view as well. And oftentimes what will happen is that the errors or the faults in your belief system will start to break up when confronted with this exercise. So it's good practice. Okay, so the teachers constantly warn their students against the error of omitting the other side of any question, and their warnings are particularly directed to the problems of the absolute and relative, which perplex all students of philosophy, and which cause so many to think and act contrary to what is generally known as common sense. And we caution all students to be sure to grasp the divine paradox of the absolute and relative, lest they become entangled in the mire of half-truth. With this in view, this particular lesson has been written. Read it carefully. And, this is difficult stuff, but I think the most important thing that's kind of referencing is that you have to be able to look at the universe from, if you really want enlightenment. I saw Jordan Peterson talking about this a couple days ago, that you have to understand evil in order to be enlightened. And it's not just that you have to understand evil. If you really want to understand what's happening on planet Earth and why, for example, you have to be able to raise yourself above the bleeding heart. What's up, John? Bleeding heart, human consciousness, and sort of view the totality of the situation from the objective position of, a totally neutral consciousness. And Is the volume low? Somebody could have said, here, let me, I can fix that, I think. Okay, maybe I can't fix it actually. We just moved, so I'm a little bit disorganized. I'm sure you can tell I just got out of the shower. And I had to scramble and I just don't know where stuff is. Can you guys hear me okay? Is it alright? Or is it like really bad? I just don't know what happened to the other mic. Okay, well, I will just continue and hope that you guys can hear me okay. So where were we? Okay. The first thought that comes to the thinking man after he realizes the truth that the universe is a mental creation of the all is that the universe and all that it contains is mere illusion, an unreality, against which idea his instincts revolt. But this, like all other great truths, must be considered from the absolute and relative point of view. From the absolute viewpoint, of course, the universe is in the nature of an illusion, a dream, a phantasmagoria as compared to the all in itself. We recognize this even in our ordinary view, for we speak of the world as a fleeting show that comes and goes, is born and dies, for the element of impermanence and change, finiteness and unsubstantiality must ever be connected with the idea of a created universe. When it is contrasted with the idea of the all, no matter what may be our beliefs concerning the nature of both, philosopher, metaphysician, scientist, and theologian all agree upon this idea, and the thought is found in all forms of philosophical thought and religious conceptions, as well as in the theories of the respective schools of metaphysics and theology. This is something that I've always kind of had a little bit of an issue with, the idea that the material universe isn't really real. I think it is real. I think that it might be more accurate to say that it's not the ultimate reality. And I'm not really sure why he says that all scientists, metaphysicians, philosophers, and theologians agree on this, because I don't think that they do. In fact, the Waorani tribe here in Ecuador doesn't have a concept of like another world or a spirit world. They say that this is the only world, and that's it. So I don't think that there is really a total and complete agreement, a consensus on that. So the Hermetic teachings do not preach the unsubstantiality of the universe in any stronger terms than those more familiar to you, although their presentation of the subject may seem somewhat more startling. Anything that has a beginning and an ending must be, in a sense, unreal and untrue, and the universe comes under the rule. From the absolute point of view, there is nothing real except the all, no matter what terms we may use in thinking of or discussing the subject. Whether the universe be created of matter, or whether it be a mental creation in the mind of the all, it is unsubstantial, non-enduring, a thing of time, space, and change. We want you to realize this fact thoroughly before you pass judgment on the Hermetic conception of the mental nature of the universe. Think over any and all of the other conceptions and see whether this not be true of them. The absolute point of view shows merely one side of the picture. The other side is the relative one. Absolute truth has been defined as things as the mind of God knows them, while relative truth is things as the highest reason of man understands them. And so, while to the all, the universe must be unreal and illusionary, a mere dream or result of meditation, nevertheless, to the finite minds forming a part of that universe and viewing it through mortal faculties, the universe is very real indeed, and must be so considered. In recognizing the absolute view, we must not make the mistake of ignoring or denying the facts and phenomena of the universe as they present themselves to our mortal faculties. We are not the all, remember? I think we are the all. And I think that what he was just saying seems kind of obvious, but it is more of an issue with humanity than you might think. There's an old saying that, there's that conservative pundit guy always says facts don't care about your feelings. That's an oversimplification, I guess, but there is a better way of saying it. The greatest sin is to refuse knowledge that doesn't pander to your prejudice. And people do this when there are aspects of the universe that they cannot handle, that they don't want to believe. They just choose to believe something that's false. And I think people choose to believe things that are false because they just can't handle existence, period, without some sort of explanation. Or the feeling of not knowing is too much for a lot of people, and so they choose delusion. I've even spoken with people that consciously will choose delusion. They know that it's a delusion, but they still choose to believe it. When I talk about the necessity of population control, sometimes a lot of people get really angry. And I'm not talking about human beings doing it. I'm talking about nature, usually, and the subverting these processes through unnatural means and the consequences that has for the earth and the people on the earth. And so, it actually, people think they're protecting themselves by, padding their perception of reality by choosing what they're going to believe, this selective perception. It's to my mind, it's unfortunate that we have the capacity to, engage selective perception and create these realities for ourselves. but so it is. What I was saying is it actually causes more suffering than it averts, because people would know what the right course is in a lot of situations where they don't currently. And so certain elements of our existence get completely out of control because people think that whatever's happening is right, because it seems moral to them, and it's actually against the laws of nature, and so it's going to cause disharmony. To take familiar illustrations, we all recognize the fact that matter exists to our senses. We will fare badly if we do not, and yet even our finite minds understand the scientific dictum that there is no such thing as matter from a scientific point of view. That which we call matter is held to be merely an aggregation of atoms, which atoms themselves are merely a grouping of units of force, called electrons or ions, vibrating in constant circular motion. They're not really in circular motion, that's kind of what they thought back then, but they are sort of, I mean, you guys know, they're actually flickering in and out of existence, but they kind of do have an orbit, a path at least. The one thing I've always wondered about that is how do they know that it's the same particles? Because that's what physicists tell us, that, you know, they're blinking in and out of existence, and we don't know where they go when they're not there. It's a really crazy thing if you really think about it, but, you know, I'm not sure I understand how they're convinced that it's the same electron coming back, you know, that it just disappeared. We kick a stone and we feel the impact. It seems to be real, notwithstanding that we know it to be merely what we have stated above. But remember that our foot, which feels the impact by means of our brains, is likewise matter, so constituted of electrons, and for that matter, so are our brains. And at the best, if it were not by reason of our mind, we would not know the foot or stone at all. Then again, the ideal of the artist or sculptor, which he is endeavoring to reduce in stone or reproduce in stone or in canvas, seems very real to him. So do the characters in the mind of the author or dramatist, which he seeks to express so that others may recognize them. And if this be true in the case of our finite minds, what must be the degree of reality in the mental images created in the mind of the infinite? O friends, to mortals this universe of mentality is very real indeed. It is the only one we can ever know, though we rise from plane to plane higher and higher in it. To know it otherwise by actual experience, we must be the all itself. It is true that the higher we rise in the scale, the nearer to the mind of the Father we reach, the more apparent becomes the illusory nature of finite things. But not until the all finally withdraws us into itself does the vision actually vanish. Again, a reference to what physicists are now calling quantum loop theory, and this idea that once all of the possibilities that can be created within the parameters defined by natural law, once that's all exhausted, the universe consumes itself and collapses back into this tiny point. And there's like a moment towards the end where we know all of it, understand all of it. We have unified with the Father mind, as he's calling it. So we need not dwell upon the feature of illusion. Rather, let us, recognizing the real nature of the universe, seek to understand its mental laws and endeavor to use them to the best effect in our upward progress through life. As we travel from plane to plane of being, the laws of the universe are nonetheless iron laws because of the mental nature. All except the all are bound by them. What is in the infinite mind of the all is real in a degree second only to that reality itself which is vested in the nature of the all. So do not feel insecure or afraid. We are all held firmly in the infinite mind of the all, and there is naught to hurt us or for us to fear. There is no power outside the all to affect us, so we may rest calm and secure. There is a world of comfort and security in this realization once attained. Then, calm and peaceful, do we sleep, rocked in the cradle of the deep, resting safely on the bosom of the ocean of infinite mind, which is the all, in the all. Indeed, do we live and move and have our being. Matter is nonetheless matter to us, while we dwell on the plane of matter, although we know it to be merely an aggregation of electrons or particles of force, vibrating rapidly and gyrating around each other in the formations of atoms. The atoms in turn vibrating and gyrating, forming molecules, which latter in turn form larger masses of matter. Nor does matter become less matter when we follow the inquiry still further and learn from the Hermetic teachings that the force of which the electrons are but units is merely a manifestation of the mind of the all, and like all else in the universe is purely mental in its nature. While in the plane of matter, we must recognize its phenomena. We may control matter, as all masters of higher or lesser degree do, but we do so by applying the higher forces. We commit a folly when we attempt to deny the existence of matter in the relative aspect. We may deny its mastery over us, and rightly so, but we should not attempt to ignore it in its relative aspect, at least so long as we dwell upon its plane. Now, I think he has sort of beaten this to death. My objective was to go through the entire book, but this is definitely, I don't see what the need was to it's like he just kept turning the phrase over and over and over and over again. I think the really important thing to understand about the divine paradox, and the really powerful, I guess, practice, is to learn to see it in everything. Everything contains its contradiction, right? This is expressed by the yin-yang, it has the white on one side and the dark on the other side, and it's a circle, so it's one thing with these two opposing forces inside of it. But furthermore, there is a black circle in the white part, and there's a white circle in the black part. And so when you think about matter, he was talking about how it's not really even there. That's true, it's mostly empty space. But then, to turn that into terms of this divine paradox that he's talking about, it's solid, but that if you were shrunk down relative, to the molecules being really large, it's mostly empty space. This wooden table, metal, whatever, anything and everything is both there and not there. And again, that's the kind of contradictions that people will use to discredit mysticism, but it's actually science that has confirmed their reality. The laws of nature do not become less constant or effective when we know them, likewise to be merely mental creations. They are in full effect on the various planes. We overcome the lower laws by applying still higher ones, and in this way only, but we cannot escape law or rise above it entirely. Nothing but the all can escape law, and that's because the all is law itself, from which all laws emerge. The most advanced masters may acquire the powers usually attributed to the gods of men, and there are countless ranks of being in the great hierarchy of life, whose being and power transcends even that of the highest masters among men to a degree unthinkable by mortals. But even the highest master and the highest being must bow to the law, and be as nothing in the eye of the all. So that if even these highest beings, whose powers exceed even those attributed by men to their gods, if even these are bound by and are subservient to law, then imagine the presumption of mortal man, of our race and greed, when he dares to consider the laws of nature as unreal, visionary and illusory, because he happens to be able to grasp the truth that the laws are mental in nature and simply mental creations of the all. Those laws which the all intends to be governing laws are not to be defied or argued away. So long as the universe endures, will they endure, for the universe exists by virtue of these laws which form its framework and which hold it together. This is another section that sounds kind of obvious, but to put it in a more pragmatic context, the most common mistake the magician makes is to believe that his magic can do more for him than it can. A lot of people become atheists because they ask God to prove that it's there or to do something for them that would require suspension of natural laws, and that can't happen. What this is basically saying is that no matter how advanced you get, you may be able to use these laws to your purposes. You may be able to relate to these laws in ways that could even make you seem superhuman and like you have godlike powers. But you'll never ever be able to do anything that is absolutely impossible. There's no way to circumvent the rule of these laws. The Hermetic principle of mentalism, while explaining the true nature of the universe upon the principle that all is mental, does not change the scientific conceptions of the universe, life, or evolution. In fact, science merely corroborates the Hermetic teachings. The latter merely teaches that the nature of the universe is mental, while modern science is taught that it is material, or of late that it is energy, moving closer to realizing that it's mind, right? The Hermetic teachings have no fault to find with Herbert Spencer's basic principle, which postulates the existence of an infinite and eternal energy from which all things proceed. In fact, the Hermetics recognize in Spencer's philosophy the highest outside statement of the workings of the natural laws that have ever been promulgated, and they believe Spencer to have been a reincarnation of an ancient philosopher who dwelt in ancient Egypt thousands of years ago, and who later incarnated as Heraclitus, the Grecian philosopher who lived BC 500, and they regard his statement of the infinite and eternal energy as directly in the line of the Hermetic teachings, always with the addition of their own doctrine that his energy is the energy of the mind of the all. With the master key of the Hermetic philosophy, the student of Spencer will be able to unlock many doors of the inner philosophical conceptions of the great English philosopher, whose work shows the results of the preparation of his previous incarnations. His teachings regarding evolution and rhythm are in almost perfect agreement with the Hermetic teachings regarding the principle of rhythm. I have no idea who that guy is. Maybe we should all look him up. So the student of Hermetics need not lay aside any of his cherished scientific views regarding the universe. All he is asked to do is grasp the underlying principle of the all as mind, the universe as mental, held in the mind of the all. He will find that the other 6 of 7 principles will fit into his scientific knowledge and will serve to bring out obscure points and throw light in dark corners. This is not to be wondered at. When we realize the influence of the Hermetic thought on the early philosophers of Greece, upon whose foundations of thought the theories of modern science largely rest, the acceptance of the first Hermetic principle, mentalism, is the only great point of difference between modern science and Hermetic students, and science is gradually moving toward the Hermetic position, and it's groping in the dark for a way out of the labyrinth into which it has wandered in search of reality. And this is kind of referencing the fact that it's almost standard that people think that science and spirituality are mutually exclusive. And that's not true. In fact, if you have some kind of spiritual belief that requires you to deny, actual reality, then it's probably not true. It's almost definitely not true. So it's a technique of a Hermetic thinker to use the alchemical transmutation process, the mental alchemical transmutation of taking these opposites that aren't really opposites, science and spirituality, and kind of combining them and seeing if they fit. And then if they don't, then you need to revise something, because they should. The purpose of this lesson is to impress upon the minds of our student the fact that to all intents and purposes, the universe and its laws and its phenomena are just as real, so far as man is concerned, as they would be under the hypothesis of materialism or energism. Under any hypothesis, the universe in its outer aspect is changing, ever-flowing, and transitory, and therefore devoid of substantiality and reality. But note the other pole of truth. Under any of the same hypothesis, we are compelled to act and live as if the fleeting things were real and substantial. With this difference always between the various hypotheses, that under the old views mental power was ignored as a natural force, while under mentalism it becomes the greatest natural force. And this one difference revolutionizes life, to those who understand the principle and its resulting laws and practice. So finally, students all grasp the advantage of mentalism and learn to know, use, and apply the laws resulting therefrom, but do not yield to the temptation which, as the Kybalion states, overcomes the half-wise, and which causes them to be hypnotized by the apparent unreality of things, the consequence being that they wander about like dream people, dwelling in a world of dreams, ignoring the practical work and life of man, the end being that they are broken against the rocks and torn asunder by the elements by reason of their folly. Rather, follow the example of the wise, which the same authority states, use laws against laws, the higher against the lower, and by the art of alchemy transmute that which is undesirable into that which is worthy, and thus triumph. Following the authority, let us avoid the half-wisdom, which is folly, which ignores the truth that mastery consists not in abnormal dreams, visions, and fantastic imaginings or living, but in using the higher forces against the lower, escaping the pains of the lower planes by vibrating on the higher. Remember always, student, that transmutation, not presumptuous denial, is the weapon of the master. The above quotations are from the Kybalion and are worthy of being committed to memory by the student. And so this is basically about making investitures of the things that you learn in these altered states, or when you have these revelations. It's a very common folly that people either start to believe that the laws no longer apply to them. See people that have spiritual experiences often disavow, like the life of the common person, and they go and live in monasteries, or even run off and hide in caves, or as I was saying earlier, they believe that their knowledge can do more for them than it can. So he's basically just saying that you need to maintain the work of your life, and to not let this spiritual pursuit drag you off into the realm of confusion and dream and unreality, which happens to an awful lot of people. We do not live in a world of dreams, but in a universe which, while relative, is real as far as our lives and actions are concerned. Our business in the universe is not to deny its existence, but to live, using the laws to rise from lower to higher, living on, doing the best that we can under the circumstances arising each day, and living, so far as is possible, to our highest ideas and ideals. The true meaning of life is not known to men on this plane, if indeed to any, but the highest authorities, and our own intuitions teach us that we will make no mistake in living up to the best that is in us, so far as is possible, and realizing the universal tendency in the same direction in spite of apparent evidences to the contrary. We are all on that path, and the road leads upward ever, with frequent resting places. Read the message of the Kybalion and follow the example of the wise, avoiding the mistake of the half-wise who perish by reason of their folly. So that is the end of that chapter. So we'll wrap up part 4 now. But, as much as I feel like he could have said all that in a lot fewer words, it is a lot of really important messages there. That if we are really truly seeking after truth and enlightenment, then you have to be willing to take an objective position. And you also have to understand that understanding something does not mean that you have to agree with it or accept it, or that it needs to change your behavior. I've noticed that a lot of people are really afraid that if they're exposed even to heavy metal, that it's gonna contaminate their being or something. And I worry about those people a lot, because your first endeavor in life should be an awareness of who you are and what your essential being is. And if you've done that, no exposure to any evil or any knowledge or any power or any understanding is going to compel you to do anything that's contrary to your fundamental nature. I've been around, and there are certain boundaries for me that I know I'm not going to violate, and I don't hesitate to listen to Guar, or watch an absolutely horrible horror movie, or contemplate the most evil things that men have done, and actually try to even see what they're doing from their point of view, just for the sake of understanding, because that's what we need. We have to have this holistic view of nature and man and the universe, the entirety of it, in order to really know how to relate to it in the best way possible. And one of the things that complicates it is that divine paradox. But it's also the reason that we have to do this, And so we know ourselves, we choose how we're going to relate to this knowledge that we acquire, and then we use that knowledge to put us where we're supposed to be. And that's basically the message of that chapter of the Kybalion. So if you guys have any questions or anything, I'll take a minute to answer them, but otherwise, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. We lost half of our patrons this month. I'm not sure what I did, but everyone that signed up in the month of February canceled before they were charged. So that was a bit crazy. Yeah, like button, support us if you can, and I'll be back with another. I might actually be out of commission for health reasons for about a week. We'll see. But otherwise, I'll see you guys in a couple of days.